You wouldn't think it would be so hard to record a podcast intro. I've been sitting here for just under 3 hours now, and I've edited and rendered 2 versions of an introduction where I was like, oh, yep, that'll do. And then as you get to the moment of putting it together, I was like, nah, don't like that. That's fucking shit. Get rid of it. Start again. Back and forth for hours and hours. And you're just like, I just want to make a fucking introduction to my show. Try and get a point across the point that I'm very gracious for everyone that listens without sounding disingenuous and being like, oh yeah, just thanks for the downloads, everyone. You know, it's like, no, thank you very much for listening. I really mean it. Yeah, see, I don't give a fuck. I'm putting this intro out. This is the last one right now. If you want to shoot us a message, if you think you've got a topic you'd like to hear us cover, go for it. Just reach out and say hi, whatever. We've had people from like all around the world just be like, oh hey man, I'm listening, and when I wake up and see that, I'm like, oh fuck yeah, then that makes it all worthwhile, because sometimes I'm sitting here going, there's a fucking billion podcasts out there, why would you bother listening to this one? But you do. Thank you. Anyway, shut up, Shaun. Thank you. Enjoy the episode. Introduction done. Congratulations to our mates Amy and Peter, who are getting married. The song's for you dudes. Thank you. Catch you. Enjoy. Later.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You're listening to Carousel Sniper Victim, a Dead Glass Design production, with your host, Shaun Jeffery.
It's really like what a condition 1 in Antarctica is really like. Check this out. This is the entryway to our dorm. Normally this has carpet on the ground and the walls are just normally walls, you know, but we're gonna open the door right now. It's a little bit like opening up the door to another world. Are you ready? It's a little bit blowy out there right now.
During his final moments of life, as consciousness was slowly slipping away from him, Rodney Marks had plenty of time to contemplate the dire situation he found himself in. He knew he was trapped, cut off from the medical attention he so desperately needed, about as far from civilization as one can be while still being on this planet. Rodney Marks was at the South Pole, a place where for 8 months of the year it's too cold to land a plane as the hydraulic fluid will freeze in minutes. A place that essentially for 8 months of the year goes into a complete lockdown. A place where small problems can very quickly become big problems. As he lay on the old Navy gurney in the biomed facility of the Amundsen Scott base, Marks may have been thinking about the Russian doctor who had given himself an appendectomy during a South Pole winterover in 1961, or of Dr. Jerry Nielsen, who in 1999 diagnosed and treated her own breast cancer with supplies dropped in by parachute. But unlike them, neither Marks nor the base's lone doctor had any idea what was actually wrong with him. Rodney David Marks was born on the 13th of March 1968 in Geelong, a city in the state of Victoria, Australia, 75 kilometres or 47 miles southwest of the state capital, Melbourne. By all accounts, a very bright young man. He grew into an intelligent young scientist and received his education from the University of Melbourne, later obtaining a PhD in astrophysics from the University of New South Wales, so quite a smart guy. Marks had wintered over at the South Pole Station before, in 1997 to 1998, before he was employed at the South Pole with the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, working on the Antarctic Submillimeter Telescope and Remote Observatory, or as they love with their acronyms, ASTRO, a research project for the University of Chicago, which was being run at the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station, staying over the full length of the winter period for months at a time, shut off from the outside world with around 50 other scientists. This time around, though, something was going very wrong. Marks had woken up that morning at around 8:30, vomiting blood, and the burn that had started in the pit of his stomach was now radiating throughout his whole body. It was already Mark's second visit to the makeshift hospital that day, and he arrived scared, anxious, and wearing sunglasses to protect his unbearably sensitive eyes. There was no one medical condition that the base physician, Dr. Robert Thompson, could think of that would explain what was happening to Marks. He was at a loss. The doctor's only link to the outside world was an internet connection and a satellite phone, and both were down at the time. The base's position at the bottom of the planet meant it lost its signal for much of each day. The doctor spent hours clutching for a diagnosis and, at one point, grabbing hold of alcohol withdrawal or even anxiety as possibilities. Dr. Thompson injected Marks with a sedative, which calmed him enough that he decided to return to his own bed and rest for a while. He lay beside his fiancée, Sonia. While Sonia managed to drift off to sleep, Marks lay there, sleepless and afraid, listening to the shifting ice growing beneath him. Then he retched again. More blood. His breathing was now uncontrollably fast. Pain throbbed in his joints and he began to panic. He made his way back to the biomed facility, stumbling through the dimly lit tunnels as he went. By the time he arrived, Marks was hyperventilating and combative. Dr. Thompson gave him another injection, this time Haldol, a powerful antipsychotic, just to regain control of him. As it took effect, Marks lay down again, but this time he began to lose consciousness. He moaned quietly with each exhale and squeezed Sonia's hand lightly. Then, his heart stopped. A station-wide alarm was activated. This was the alarm to summon the trauma team. The trauma team consisted of a few trained volunteers whose real jobs could be anything from scientist to mechanic. Darren Schneider, a fellow physicist and the only other Australian at the base, was the first to arrive. He took over for Sonia, holding the ventilator mask over his good friend's nose and mouth, desperately pumping air into Marks's lungs. Then, just before 6 in the evening, as the trauma team scrambled, Marks took a deep, sighing breath into his chest. It was his last. It was the 12th of May, the year 2000. There wasn't another plane due to touch down at the base for a full 5 months. The team would have to wait 5 months for a plane to be able to retrieve their friend's body. At the time of Mark's death, the crew assumed he had suffered a heart attack or aneurysm. The National Science Foundation that ran the operations at the base itself even issued a statement within hours saying that, quote, he had apparently died of natural causes. But as we would soon learn, there was nothing natural about the way Rodney Marks died at all. South Pole astronomers have the coldest commute to work on the planet. The observatory where they work is a full kilometre from the main station, in an area officially known as the Dark Sector. Like most base astronomers, Marks would bundle up and make the round trip on foot every day. It was during the walk home from the observatory one Thursday night in May that Marks first sensed there was something wrong with him. At about 6:30, he and Sonia arrived in the galley, where he ate a light meal and drank a can of beer. He mentioned to her that he wasn't feeling well and that he was having trouble seeing clearly. By 9:30, he had retired to the room they shared and fell asleep. That night in the galley was the last time most of the winter crew would ever see Marks alive. He would spend the next 21 hours fighting for his life. Schneider's blog entry for friends and family back home, written the following night after he had spent nearly an hour trying to save his close friend on the base, would read, quote, "We did everything we could, but Rodney did not come back. He had friends around him at the end. We have no idea what happened." While Schneider and the others tried to come to terms with and drown the day's events at the bar, Mark's remains were placed in a body bag and stored in a service area known as the fuel arches, connected to the main station through one of the tunnels. The ambient temperatures there were plenty cold to preserve his corpse, but his friends felt like he deserved a more dignified resting place. Like the explorers that came before them, they considered their work rather heroic, and Mark was one of the best South Pole scientists they'd ever known. The station carpenters found and milled an old stash of heavy oak for a casket, and the machinist crafted the metal fittings. Schneider and one of the cooks upholstered the interior with an old tablecloth, and Sonia made a maple plaque with a brass inlay of Mark's favourite constellation, Scorpio. Once finished, they placed his body in the casket, then used a traditional wooden Nansen sled to haul it out to the geographical South Pole for a quiet ceremony. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the entire crew gathered under an ink-black sky as someone read a statement from Marks's mother, and friends said a few words. Marks was then lowered 5 feet deep into the ice. Antarctica belongs to no one. 7 countries officially have territorial claims on the continent, but the US has never recognised any of them. Supported by a 1915 Treaty of Cooperation, 29 countries have set up scientific research stations there, and an ever-changing population of up to 4,500 scientists and support staff from all corners of the globe call it home for anywhere from 4 days to 14 months at a time. Amundsen Scott is populated year-round by scientists, most working for American universities and studying the atmosphere, astronomy or seismology, and a support staff that includes everyone from cooks to carpenters. Nearly 250 people are based there in summer, but the population shrinks to just a quarter of that for the austral winter, February through October. The first week of February is frenzied as the remaining summer crew clears out and the winter crew receives its vital resupplies. The real cold arrives in March and the base becomes a very different place. Soon the sun no longer makes it above the horizon and it becomes so cold, temperatures regularly hit -80 that planes' hydraulic fluids freeze within minutes, as we've said. After the last plane leaves, there's no way in or out for 8 months, and the continent goes dark and quiet. New Zealand is Antarctica's nearest neighbour. Christchurch, on the South Island, is a small coastal city of about 400,000, but its population swells slightly every spring as people from all over the world pass through on their way to Antarctica, then again in the fall as they return to catch commercial flights back to their home countries. Murder rates are low, and veteran detective Grant Warmold, 44, spends most of his time overseeing theft and fraud investigations. In June 2000, 4 months before flights in and out of Antarctica would resume, Wormold's office received a curious fax from the local coroner, an order to begin investigating the death of an Australian citizen stationed at an American base in Antarctica. Rodney Marks's case was fraught with jurisdictional haziness. An Australian on an American base in Antarctica and New Zealand will investigate. Despite the jurisdictional ambiguity, nonetheless, New Zealand law states that the coroner is entitled to hold an inquest on the basis of a body simply being present in the country, and Christchurch was certain to be the first place Marx's body would land. And besides all that, jurisdiction would soon become the least confusing thing about Marx's death. Anywhere else in the world, following the unexplained death of someone so young and healthy, Marx's office and sleeping quarters would have been cordoned off and preserved for investigation. And although the base's management company is reported to have requested this, its authority was simply too remote to impress upon the grief-stricken crew who felt sure Marx had died of natural causes. A few items were collected from his office and bedroom and put aside, but anything that didn't look suspect went straight into the garbage. After being cleaned up, both areas continued to be used as they had been before his death. His office by other scientists and his room by his partner Sonia, who lived there for the rest of the winter. At around midnight on the 30th of October, the first plane off the ice landed in Christchurch carrying Marx's casket. It was sent to be examined by the forensic pathologist. Also on board this initial return flight were Darren Schneider and Sonia, who wearily made their way to a hotel where Marx's mother, Ray, and his two sisters were waiting to meet them. They headed over to the local bar to have an impromptu wake and celebrate the memory of Marx. On the 19th of December, now 6 weeks after the body had arrived back from the South Pole, the forensic pathologist made a shocking announcement. Rodney Marx had been poisoned. His blood contained lethal traces of methanol, a highly toxic wood alcohol-based chemical that Marx used to clean the high-tech telescopes, but in amounts far beyond what would be expected with normal contact, about a small wine glass's worth, virtually certain to have been ingested. The news was all the more tragic because of testimony that base physician Robert Thompson had given a month earlier. He had revealed that while Marx lay dying, his potential lifeline was sitting dormant in a corner of the room, an Ectochem blood analyzer. Its single, tiny lithium-ion battery had died, and therefore, the machine lost its calibration every time it was turned off. Once turned back on, it took up to 9 hours to recalibrate. Dr. Thompson had known about the malfunction and even reported it to Raytheon, but for some reason never attempted to fix it and decided against simply leaving it on. It was by no means a necessary piece of equipment in the physician's day-to-day duties, but it was there for a reason. Emergencies just like this one. Had his condition been caught in time, reversing the effects would have been a simple matter of running a mixture of ethanol and saline through his body. Even if it hadn't have saved his life, it would have immediately raised the question of how methanol could have possibly gotten into his system. Considering what Marx had going for him when he died, a fiancé, a sterling reputation amongst his colleagues, and a bright future, suicide was ruled out almost immediately. And for those who knew Marx, it was equally inconceivable that one of his fellow polies would intentionally do him any harm. Quoting one of the telescope mechanics that worked alongside Marx,
"I never noticed anyone acting differently afterward, and I can't think of anyone who would have disliked Rodney that much or had anything against him, or even anything to gain by it."
It was looking more and more likely that someone had simply made a tragic mistake. But who? And how? Detective Grant Warmold would eventually learn that Marx's workspace was notoriously messy. Bottles of lab agents like methanol and ethanol were often strewn about alongside a dozen or so empty bottles of alcohol. The methanol used at the South Pole is similar to car windshield wiper fluid, while the less toxic ethanol, a common ingredient in the base's homemade moonshine, is more like rubbing alcohol. Both are colourless and nearly as odourless as vodka, and almost indistinguishable from one another. Mistaking the two was certainly a possibility, especially by someone under the influence of alcohol. But it's unlikely that that person would have been Marx. He certainly knew how lethal it was and that ingesting even a small amount could be fatal. Given the contained nature of the incident and the fact that he had a finite list of witnesses, Detective Warmold was feeling optimistic about his investigation. I mean, how often do you get a suspicious death investigation along with a list of the only other possible people on the continent? But then he hit a brick wall with the National Science Foundation, the company that managed the American Research Center, the one that Marks worked at. Remember, it's technically American soil, an American base with an American flag. In 2002, Detective Warmold made a formal request for the contact information of the 2000 winter crew, along with any other facts that the National Science Foundation or the NSF had gathered during its own investigation. He got no immediate response. He requested the results of lab tests done on what little evidence was collected in Marks's room and work area. Nothing. Detective Warmold's investigation came to a near standstill, as almost every request he made was met with silence. The organisation seemed to be in lockdown. Over the next 4 years, Detective Warmold persisted with his own investigation as the NSF and Raytheon drip-fed him information. The NSF also never announced the results of its own investigation, effectively absolving itself of any culpability in the matter. The agency appeared ready to move on, but Detective Warmold wasn't. Quoting a statement from the detective, "I'd like to think if my children went down to work there and something went wrong, someone would be responsible for finding out what happened. I know Rodney's family wants to know why the machinery that would have diagnosed his illness wasn't working and whether anyone will actually be held accountable, whether anyone even gives a shit. Someone should be required to give a damn." Finally, in 2005, the NSF agreed to forward questionnaires to the remaining 49 members of the 2000 winter crew on Detective Warmold's behalf. He got just 13 back. It seemed that they were as eager as the NSF to put the incident behind them, accepting it as a freak or tragic mistake. Even those closest to Marks, including his fiancée Sonia, decided early on that to keep chasing answers was to degrade the memory of their friend. In September of 2003, the official findings from the coroner, based largely on Warmold's investigation, were finally released. The 50-page report is little more than a neatly packaged catalogue of theories and speculation, concluding that, quote, "Rodney David Marks died as a result of acute methanol poisoning, probably occurring 1 or 2 days earlier, he being either unaware of the overdose or not understanding the possible implications of it." So basically, he killed himself by accident. Despite the official coronial inquiry being put to rest, there's one tradition that Marks's friend Schneider refuses to let die, a living memory of his good friend Rodney Marks. After the winter crew of 2000 buried him in the ice, they planted an Australian flag over his grave, a temporary marker to help them find the casket again at the end of the season. When his body was flown back to Christchurch, a flag was all that remained at the South Pole to mark the tragedy. Schneider decided it should stay. Since then, each time Schneider returns to the Amundsen Scott base, he removes the old, brittle, sun-baked piece of cloth and replaces it with a new one. For nearly 10 years now, he and 3 of Mark's other close friends have acted as unofficial stewards, making sure there's always a Commonwealth star waving at Mark's last resting place in Antarctica. Quote, "The NSF hates it and continually fights to get rid of it. I guess they don't want there to be a reminder of the incident, but I want that flag there, and Rodney's family liked the fact that the point in the ice is marked." To this day, Marks's case remains one of the coldest of cold cases. Polies have a saying, "What happens on the ice stays on the ice," and to them, to try to help outsiders understand what life is like there is an antithesis to why one goes there in the first place. Perhaps Rodney Marks himself would be perfectly happy to remain one of the South Pole's greatest unsolved mysteries. Just like the cosmos that he loved to study, the truth is out there, but maybe we'll never know. And that there is the story of Rodney Marks's unfortunate death. Still unsolved, cold case all the way down from Antarctica. And I was stuck on that intro for like 3 hours. You just get like crazy writer's block or creative block sometimes, where you're just like, how should I start this episode, or how do I end this one? And then I got stuck for ages at the end here, where I was like, how do I end it? Do I just go straight into this song? And I started with an acoustic song, but that was like, that doesn't fit the theme of this song at all. And then I was going to use a metal song, but I was like, that's way too abrasive. It's going to blow people's eardrums out as soon as it comes in, and they're going to be like, ugh, I hated that, it ruined the mood. And then I tried this like electronica dance sort of song, and I was like, no, don't like this at all. So come clean and ramble with you for a bit about how hard it is to try and make an effective, coherent theme throughout, but appreciate you listening, and I've got a few shout outs anyway. So as always, the Robots for Eyes dudes, much love. Sorry about those fucking assholes breaking into your van, heard about that. Motherfuckers. Baked and Awake podcast, fucking legend, man. Cheers for your follows and all that sort of stuff. Dave Chaffee, go follow him at Real Man Brain podcast. He's a fucking sick cunt too. Paul Sparrow, Adam Phillips, Joe Crook, Jeremy, fucking all you blokes. Cheers, dudes. What else? I think that's it. Breakdown tomorrow. Cheers for listening. Really appreciate it. It's late. I'm delirious. This is me having a breakdown. Macshane song. Engage.
A silent hill while I'm alone in the dark, honing my craft, atoning my art, no moment apart, with no one's regard. I should've known this was hard. I'm not a quitter though, I'm prone to restart. So I opened the document hoping to compliment what I wrote was incompetent, choking my confidence. I paused, then I thought I deleted a file. Inspiration is dry, I depleted the file. So I waited a little while, then I stared at the keys, vacantly gazing in space, glaring at the screen, trying to find ideas, though where could they be? I activate caps lock and just prepare for the stream. Then I thought that I caught something rare for a theme. Writer's block and try to stop you there in a scheme. I type a lot so I just not share what it means to find a page that you like and tear up the seams. You just need to find something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing. You just need to find something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing. You just need to find something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing. You just need to find something worth pursuing, something that's worth doing. It's a 9 to 5 in Microsoft Office, writing my lines while I hide in my solace. The paperclip talks if I type like a novice. Its advice was good, its lie was a promise. Biding my time while I lie in my coffin, banking on my luck to survive with the profits. The hour's here for the rise of Colossus. Unclipped my wings, took flight like I'm Horace. Detention blackboard, feeling like a stupid chore. Thought I had a talent, maybe I should use it more. Pen and poetry, talking like a troubadour. One small step can turn into a lunar walk. From the minor leagues, I move up to the majors. Place the bet against myself, I'd lose it in a wager. Taste success, I infused it with a flavor. Scurvy almost hurt me, there's no fruit without the labor. You just need to find something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing. You just need to find something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing. You just need to find something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing, something worth pursuing. You just need to find something worth pursuing, something that's worth doing.